Thank you, Steph. Okay. I think we're probably good to go here. Mark, do you want to open up, or do you want to have someone here take the reins?
Let's let Phil take the reins.
Oh, great.
That way you got the majority.
Okay, we're going to call the joint board meeting to order. I just will do a roll call in the room of members that are present. Terry Murphy.
Terry Murphy's here, yeah.
Sean Mulholland. Phil Warren. We also have in the room Jim Merrill. I apologize. I don't know.
Kathy Fox.
Kathy Fox. Paul Shane.
Teresa Rosenberger.
Teresa Rosenberger. If we could have joint board members that are participating remotely.
I'm Joy Knoll, and I am participating remotely.
And Mark Dakota, I'm participating remotely.
Okay. Sean, you have the map up, because I'm doing the minutes. Thank you. Okay. So we don't have any minutes to review today. And the third thing would be legislative update. Jim.
Sure. So why don't we, first of all, for the minutes, so the last joint board meeting was on June 7th. So we have, as you probably know, the video is posted to the website. We have about an hour, 10 minutes in that meeting. So we are going to go back and create minutes and have you approve them the next meeting. So, but legislatively, I think I may want to kind of take a few moments here to kind of set the stage for what we're looking at going ahead to 2022. I emailed you, Paul, did you get a copy of this?
Yep.
Okay. I emailed a copy of a document we put together to kind of do a recap of some of the bills we were looking at in 2021, determining their disposition, as well as looking ahead to 2022. We've got a number of LSRs now have language attached to them and have a bill number. So the document, for anything we have language for that may be interesting, I've appended it to this memo. There's still a number of LSRs as well that we don't have language for yet. But we have at least flagged the titles that may be of interest. And then, of course, there are still Senate LSRs that are confidential that we don't know that will be coming out over the next few weeks and potentially a few months. But I thought it'd be good to have Teresa and Kath. We've been talking to some legislators in the last week or two just to kind of reinforce and reconfirm what we've been talking to them about in recent months about what they expect on this topic next year. And so we've had a couple of those conversations. I think they'll be relevant for your edification. So, Teresa, I'm going to go to you first. I know you got to leave a little bit early.
Yep.
So if you want to kind of share, that'd be great.
I have my mask on for two reasons. I had surgery right here. It's the first time I've been to a meeting and had to talk. So, and I don't want you to see this nasty scar. Anyway, it would make me uncomfortable, shall I say. I talked to two members of the House Education Committee and one member of the Ways and Means Committee this week. And I think you talked to Finance. Yes. Yeah. The chair of the House Education Committee was quite interesting, in that he said they've already got for 2022 a little over 50 bills. He said they're planning on, or they're expecting they'll get nearly 100. Now that's well over 10% of the whole workload of the House for this year. And they're all over the place. He's got over 20 bills having to do with the Education Freedom Accounts. All but 4 are trying to, you remember what I'm talking about, the Education Freedom Accounts where the state money goes with the child. All but 4 of those are to repeal the program. Then he said he really hasn't seen much inadequacy. There's a bill coming out from Aaron Hennessy, Senator Hennessy, that's dealing with adequacy, but it's dealing with the definition of adequacy, days attended versus days in residence, and it's a really technical issue as to whether the word is attendance or residency. I said to him, I don't see what difference it makes. And he said, well, it really doesn't, as far as the funding formula is concerned. That, I think, is a confidential. I haven't seen it, Kathy. I don't know if you've seen it, Aaron's bill.
Not as of today. No,
No,
again, these
no,
this
I haven't
is
seen it.
trickling out.
I think it's a confidential. That's the only thing he knows of that's really doing anything with adequacy. He also said that they are going to try to keep or either put as much as they can in interim study or as much as they can kill, because they don't want to go to the House floor. As you know, we had more than we normally see, of turnovers. Either people died or people resigned because they lost their chairmanship or vice chairmanship or whatever. So the margin in the House for Democrats and Republicans is really small. I think it's 4 people, maybe 6 people. It's not many. So the Republicans are holding a really slim majority. I think they don't know if they can control anything when it goes to the House floor. And so they don't want it to go to the House floor. They just don't. They just said, even things that they want to get through, they really don't want to take the risk of it going to the House floor. The Senate has been very clear that they don't want to see basically any of these education bills. Maybe bills on career technical education. That's about it, and what you do with that. But I think they're going to really try not to let much go forward. I then talked to the other 2, and nobody knows of anything on education and the funding formula. So without anything, I don't know whether you've heard anything differently from Karen, but I'm talking to the guys, we assume they know what they're talking about, but who knows? And I didn't talk to the Senate, but the Senate's not going to put anything in on education funding. So I think it's going to be a very interesting year. Now, when I looked at this report and some of the things on it, you've got some votes coming up in January on the first session day that are 11 to 9 or 11 to 8. If they're worried about what's coming up in 2022 and being on the floor, I should be worried about what's going to be on the floor on January 5th or 6th, whichever.
Both, actually,
Yeah,
the House,
yeah.
at least, yeah.
So, and you certainly have of those retained bills, you've got 608, and that's a 12-to-8 vote. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Nobody's heard anything, at least the 3 I talked to, heard nothing yet. But granted, this was December 1st when I talked to them. Nothing yet. Amendments or things coming up for that first session day. So I think we got to keep our ears open to that. But what I kept hearing is what they're going to look at. They're going to look at the definition of adequacy, because some of the Republicans truly don't think the definition of adequacy is correct. They're going to look at the definition, but besides that, they're not going to do anything with the funding policy. Rick Ladd did say that when the revenues come out, if we have more money than we think we do, that you may see the state funding some things in education that they haven't funded well. So they may be funding something now at 60%, so they may, but they, by law, can fund up to 75%, so you may see them adding a few dollars in. But that's really pretty much all I'm hearing. I don't know what you're hearing.
So earlier today, I met with Karen Umberger. She is the chair of House Finance, and she's also the chair of the working group on the education funding. And basically, in a nutshell, she doesn't see any changes there. What's going to really just be the topics next year, you've seen the news, whether it's mandates, vaccines, abortion. That's what she sees as far as what the House dealing with more so. but no major changes to education funding. What she would like to accomplish through this task force, and why we keep it a pulse in it, is that she wants to address the issues of the free and reduced meals for low-income families. What they've learned is that one of the biggest issues has been the city of Manchester. They've lost, I guess, a ton of students that have left the public school system and gone elsewhere. So the cost of the EFAs have gone from what they budgeted, $1 million, to up what they're projecting, about $8 million. So she's like, okay, they understand why families make changes, how do we fund it. She'd like to do something in 2022 to be prepared for the budget in 2023, the following year. And that's what was discussion today. They want to assist communities as far as whether it's free and reduced with differential aid that communities need. So they're working, as of today, they had Department of Health and Human Service come in. They've been working with Department of Education. How do we get the data? How do we share the data? But that would be her goal. She did comment she was unhappy with GELCAR, which is the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, because there's a hiccup with the historic horse racing. She was looking at that type of funding, you know, again, to help with whether it's differential aid or free and reduced meals, et cetera. So it's funny how she commented on that in that sense there. So that's her request, and that was the goal, or what you'd like to accomplish through this ad hoc, to see what we can do in that sense. Not changing formulas, but how can we address the needs of the community, the differential aid. I think we're hearing the same, you know. Doesn't go to say there are others, like Representative Luna, who would like to just upend everything. That's, I mean, you see the bill, so, yeah, so, however.
It seems, if I can characterize it from our conversations and reading what's happening, and Kat mentioned that the battle lines are being drawn on these other really, you know, hot button issues, and abortion now is gonna, there's no question that's gonna take a lot of bandwidth. As redistricting proceeds, people are gonna get into election mode pretty quickly. And so it seems like there's a lot of desire to, not surprisingly, push this off. Let's see what happens in November of next year, and then take this up. And of course, some of the bills that are, you know, pending here and will be taken up in January may end up resulting in interim study reports that result in potentially something that gets brought forward, but not in 2022. But of course, the reason why we put it, there are a lot of bills in here and a lot of LSRs that you look at and say, this isn't germane. I mean, but, you know, we're trying to, you know, we know what issues we're looking for. We're casting a broad net because we know people are going to amend things. They're going to try and slip things in. They're going to, you know, those who are advocates for their position may certainly try and take advantage of an opportunity and push something through. And so we want to be cognizant of that. Obviously, there are certain bills that are a higher priority than others, and they'll get that level of attention. And I do want to say, and they're flagged in here, I know we've talked about them previously, but, and I think, Paul, you've mentioned this as a logistical concern going forward, what the legislature is going to do with regard to remote meetings. And so, you know, maybe some loosening of what we're required to do and what we can do with remote going forward. There seems to be some support for that and not understanding. But I think in the near term, we'll need to continue this fashion. There is also another funky bill in here I do want to flag, because I think it's relevant. That's the lobbying bill concerning state funds. And we want to watch that closely and understand it as it, you know, may come into a place that impacts us. So.
Which number is that?
That's House Bill 1033, 1033, however you want.
The annual bill. The anti-NHS. Oh, yeah, right, but it has, I think, broader context.
Oh, yeah. No question.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Follow up on your discussions relative to the bills that are changing adequacy. No matter what you do to adequacy, it affects the cost, either up or down.
Right.
Is the driving notion here to again cut the cost, therefore they can cut the rate and look good in election season? Or because of all these freedom accounts, they've got to adjust it to maybe boost the rates that people get from the premium account. This seems really a push me, pull you, effect going on with those two goals in mind. So,
I
can
think,
you read tea leaves on that?
well, let me just, I don't know if I need any tea leaves, but let me just say, I've been talking to, Rick and Ladd for years. I mean, we've worked together, and he really continually had a bee in his bonnet about adequacy. And there's some things in the adequacy point, and he's a former, superintendent of schools, I think, in Alaska, he's a principal, he speaks in education. There are some things, in the adequacy formula he just thinks are ridiculous. He thinks it should be reading, writing, arithmetic, and PE. And basic, frankly, art too, the music, but not much else beyond that. So I don't think I'm pretty sure his feelings are not tied to getting more money for the EFA, to the Education Freedom Account. And I'm not so sure he's really looking at it and he wants to fund, have the state fund less. I think he just is, we need to fund, I mean, he's
So
pretty.
it's truly a definitional issue, so it's not a subterfuge for.
I have not once heard him, and we've talked about this for years. I'm very fond of him, but when he gets on the phone and I touch a subject that he likes, he just goes. It might be a 45-minute conversation about his theory of education, but
I heard a lot of it during the commission.
Yeah. No, you did.
Like transportation.
Yeah, he's got very definite ideas on this stuff. And so I think from where he's coming from, it's really the definition of adequacy. I think a number of the people who are working with him on the House side is the definition, but I wouldn't say there aren't some in there who aren't trying to get the numbers down. I haven't heard anything about the Freedom Account. I haven't heard it being looked at from that perspective, but I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't a number in there that want to get the dollars down. But I don't think Rick Ladd is, I don't think he's one of them. And it's going to be, he and I talked about it at length yesterday. It's going to be interesting to see how he controls his committee, because you've got a lot of people on his committee who want some of these bills that he wants to put in a study or kill his pass. For example, the Education Freedom Account. You've got a lot of people who are saying it shouldn't be 300% of poverty, it should be open-ended, or it should be 500%. And he's just saying, let's just leave all of it alone, let's deal with the career technical training and any technical things we have to do to meet the definition of that. But I think you're right to be suspicious, and there are probably some out there.
So what would be helpful, I think, for us, and we don't have to do it necessarily here and walk through, but, we're going to do what we've done, and you've been getting weekly reports. We're going to, as we kind of turn the calendar page and go to 2022, the 2021 bills that get carried forward will either drop, or if they somehow proceed, they'll be dealt with, and then we'll have a slate of 2022 bills. The language attached to these LSRs will come forward. Sean, you mentioned getting a call from Senator Prentice about a potential bill. We've got to kind of link that to a LSR number or understand if it's confidential right now. But you'll see that going forward. And then, I think we want to, make sure we're all on the same page about what we want to do proactively, bills that we want to weigh in on. We do have a couple of votes coming up in early January. We're going to want to monitor for any potential amendments that take them from benign to maybe something different. And the time for that will be coming up over the next few weeks if we get to that point. But, like I said, we'll keep the large screen here, but we'll do something on the report to kind of, the bills of particular relevance we'll flag separately. And then the others that we're monitoring just for potential subterfuge or, to your point, Paul, suspicion, we'll have as well. So we'll track them all through the process. But again, I think the sense we get is it's an election year. There's some other interesting moving parts. The Senate president is very seriously looking at running for U.S. Senate, very seriously. And if that happens, that's gonna change that dynamic. I'm told by leadership in the Senate that their goal is to wrap things up as quickly as they can. They do not wanna, focus too much effort here in conference so much as making sure they get out and get reelected.
That's why they've said that message very strongly to chairs of committees in the House, don't send it to the Senate.
Correct.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
the sense is that there's gonna be these really, red meat issues that get taken up. I think and Kath, I think you were sitting in the committee, when the unanimous interim study report came out, as it's on 608, where they basically said, look, this is complex, we need to really dig deep on this. We just don't have the ability to do it right now. And so in any event, that's, checking on that, but.
I mean, House Bill 504? On the
Oh, 504, sorry.
504, yeah.
504,
No, and
right.
the sponsor of that, Representative Richard Ames, had moved that. It's a lot, I think there's always a good intention, but to get there, they need, the House doesn't have the staff like the Senate does for them to do research and all that. It's up to them, as you know. So, and I think there is a caution that, okay, maybe they're on different, platforms of what they want to accomplish, but they don't want to do any harm per se. They want to do the best to help, so, exactly. And real quick, and I caught it when I was reviewing this earlier, and I know we watched House Bill 108, which was the attorney-client privilege, or that work doctrine that came out of that Supreme Court case. So, that went to a committee conference, short story, long story, and they all agreed. So, one of the members on House Judiciary who was on the committee conference, Representative Volper, he's put in the bill to repeal now that right to know attorney-client. And I don't mean to laugh, sorry, but I called him. He's a good guy. And because we're watching this for another client. And I said, Reverend, could you check me? I said, he says, I never liked it. I said to the chair of House Judiciary, I don't like it, but he said, we're moving it forward. So he said, I told the chair I'm going to put in the bill. And I said, well, you are true to your word. I'm like, it just became law. And it's what it is. It's just, it keeps you, when I sat down, I went, wait a minute, I know this group was, okay. So I'll add that, and we'll keep a pulse on that. I know a lot of people will. And again, the Municipal Association had support that, as well as the AG's office. They did not agree with the Supreme Court decision. So I think we can safely monitor that and let the other parties, weigh in unless you choose differently. But
Can the Supremes recall that decision? That question?
They did, and we're waiting on that. So and thank you for reminding that, because that's what Representative Volper had cited. He goes, look, then they said, well, maybe we need to rethink it. And that was like back in April, I think.
Right, exceptionally rare circumstance.
Yeah, and we've heard nothing further. So we shall see, and I'm sure Representative Volper is following that as well.
But his proposal would bring things back to the status quo as they were before.
Correct, yeah.
So the attorney-client privilege would still exist.
I would defer to you. Yes, he does not, get back to status quo. There's always that.
Status quo of the original.
The original, yeah.
Not prior to.
Well, no, because the decision's been recalled by the Supreme.
Right.
Still has some precedent.
Not if it's recalled.
It can't be, a precedent as of yet, but it still has standing.
Not if it's been recalled.
I don't know. I'm not a
It's
legal
a good question for some legal ease, but you're right. It seems to be, and I assume maybe there are municipalities saying, look, we're just, moving forward with this law, 108. So it's.
Safe to say, yeah, there are a lot of folks sitting at that table.
I think I thought it was a weird call because.
Oh, it never happened.
Not only does it never happen, but the way it happened was odd to us, I recall. So that's why I'm a little hesitant on whether it has precedent standing or not, because we're not reversing the decision, but.
Right.
We want to rewrite it.
Because it didn't happen, but,
Yeah.
with a big but on it, yeah. Interesting.
I'll bring it up now, Mark, unless you think otherwise. Mark and I had an email exchange after Jane Perini shared an email with a link to what the Better Education Foundation.
Reaching higher? Is that-
with that,
Reaching higher?
reaching, yeah, right, yeah. And watching their video and going through their, website, they've posted a number of, articles and analysis of their position, obviously, which aren't that far or distinct from our own. So, I posed the question to Mark whether, it, for exploration, to find common ground, at least on some issues, and come in collectively so that it isn't viewed that we do have an us and them viewpoint. We can find areas of agreement. We may not agree entirely. Certainly, those funding issues are core to our element. But I think they also recognize the continued property tax funding of education is part of the problem. So, Mark, did you have any more thoughts on that?
No, I don't know if the group, should we reach out to them in any way? Does it make sense to have a discussion with them as a group? If they are aligned in some ways with us, should we find out more about that and see if we maybe, I don't know, if there's a bill that we could oppose together that might be beneficial for us. I don't know.
Do they have a registered lobbyist?
They do, well, I believe they do, is Jeff McLynch. He's been attending the Division Two.
Is he registered there?
I believe he is,
Okay.
yeah, I can double check.
He's their executive director, right?
Yeah, he's part of their internal,
Whatever.
it's not like an outside firm.
Yeah, no,
Right.
he's, right, no, he's internal.
What's their platform?
Well, they're supportive of, the Claremont decision, stating that, there are districts that are truly getting shafted here, and it's because our education funding, process or policies are so flawed. They've not advocated, to my knowledge, a specific funding source, but they do seem to recognize that part of the problem is overly relying on property taxes because the measure of inadequacy or inequality has been this per pupil evaluation score that they use. So I think if push came to shove and the only way to remedy their funding quantity, they probably support a donor town tax type of arrangement. But I'm not sure that they're wedded to that, nor do they really desire it. It's only the outcome. Should it be the only means to their end?
I've seen them mainly at the legislature on the voucher issue. I mean, I don't know what you've seen them on. I've seen them on really supporting public schools and public boards of education, and really opposing like the education freedom account, the education tax credit, anything that is taking funding away from the school. I haven't seen them on the adequacy, on the funding side. Have you, Kathy?
I agree with you. No, I have not. Just think of the share of hearings and such. I mean, Jeff will be in the room, but I don't see the groundswell that maybe other group,
Yeah, they don't really have there's not a grassroots presence there. So so Tom Rath, I talked to Tom not long ago, and I think he's actually told him, he was a co-chair of the group with Alan Raish, who's an attorney in Manchester. I think Tom just said he's finished his time there. But if you read their mission statement, it's a fairly benign, like, we want to prepare kids for, success, higher education, everything else. So my perspective is it's worth exploring. I always like to know where someone else is sitting. So rather than, being ignorant about where they might be and whether they're foe or not, if there's common ground, I think it wouldn't be a bad thing to build allies. And even if we don't agree on everything. And if there's a meeting that's held and nothing comes of it, then that's fine. But at least we can say we've had the conversation. And moreover, when we talk to other folks who may bring them up, and again, there's not an army of volunteers out there, but we can say that we've had a conversation with them and we've found some accommodation of some issues. So from my perspective, I think it's something that we could use to our benefit in the legislature.
The odd thing is their primary source of funding is from the charitable foundation. So someone's got sway enough to pull that.
Well, it
Well,
sounds
why-
like we need to explore
Mhm.
more information about them before we build a bridge to them.
No doubt.
Would it make sense for Jim or someone from your group to reach out to their registered lobbyists? Just see, you know, kind of start the discussion? Because you may find at that level, you might be too far apart, or you may have many goals aligned. And I think that would kind of save us a bit of time than just trying to put two groups together.
I certainly would agree with that. I think it would be worth us to do due diligence first.
Yeah.
And have a kind of an informal conversation to see what kind of common ground there may be. That could be with Jeff. I'm happy to talk to Tom about it. He's been there since the inception. And then come back with something to report on and say, here's where there may be some common interests
Yeah.
that may be worth, and leave it to you to decide, but we can provide that feedback.
Yeah.
I think we do our homework.
Yeah, why don't we do an agenda item for next time? And you give us an update, Jim, on it, and then we can make a
Yeah.
decision whether or not to reach out to them.
Okay?
Hey, this
It's
is,
very good social media wise.
Why would we wait? Why don't we just reach out to them now and have that conversation occur between Jim and their person now? And then he can report back what the results of that are. But we saying the same thing here?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, but let me just break in. Jane had a comment. I want to make sure we hear what she has to say as well.
We also do have a question. Sorry.
yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
think
Jane.
that
Sorry.
sounds like a great, process to reach out. But I did have a question on the whole House Bill 108, and I'm sorry, I've got stuff going on here in the office, so I might not have heard everything right. But notwithstanding the Supreme Court's recall of their decision, didn't the budget revise the right to know law to go back to what it was and actually clarify that the records were protected under the attorney-client privilege and the attorney work product doctrine?
Jane, it's Kathy. With the attorney, the right to work, that was through House Bill 108.
Right.
I think she might be right. We'll go back and look. I think there might have been something in
An
the,
HB2?
on the trailer bill.
Yes, I
Maybe
think
it
they
might-
stuck a
might-
bunch of
I think
stuff
there was something
in,
the trailer bill.
yeah, I think they stuck some interesting things in the budget bill. And my recollection of the New Hampshire Municipal Association summary of bills for the year was that in the budget bill, they actually did change that right to know law back regarding the client communications. But if you guys could just double check, I don't know that, once I got that, I didn't check to see whether the governor might have repealed portions of the budget bill or not, but it was my understanding it was back on track.
Jane, that's easy enough to look up, but I can pull up House Bill 2, the trailer bill, and see. There was, as you recall, there was a lot of the right to know stuff floating this year.
Yes.
And there's still more coming next year. It's like a whirlwind of right to know. But I'll
Right.
double check with
Yeah,
you.
double check it, maybe it's the final one. I remember what she's talking about, but I don't remember what.
If it made it to
was
the final.
very
Yeah, right.
final one.
It's confusing
There's
to
a lot of
look
wiggle
at that.
there. Yeah, yeah.
Just a tad, Jane, just a tad.
But it'd
No,
be
I don't
great
even
if,
know what they did.
Sure. Absolutely, we can do that, I'll look that up. It's
yeah,
easy
that'd be
enough,
great.
sure.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, no, not a problem.
If I could just, before we move on, to loop back briefly to the conversation about reaching higher. So, and Mark, I think you and Sean are saying the same thing. You're suggesting to get basically an interim report before the next meeting, is that?
Send it on,
Yes.
find out what they're all about.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I think we do our homework on
So-
it. I'm not 100% sure where they are.
yeah.
And so I think we look at what's out there, we do some intelligence, and then
Okay.
possibly you make.
That's parallel tracks.
Yeah.
Exactly, right. So we'll get to work on that. And to, I think, Sean, your point about their social media, and they're getting a lot of funding from the Sheridan Foundation. So one of their board members is Lou Feldstein,
Right.
who is a longtime former head of the group. So,
And
yeah.
I think they were started out of that, and it was,
Right.
it was to counteract the whole voucher thing way back, this may have been 6 or 7 years ago. And I think Lou was not part of the charitable foundation, he retired, I think, when they did it, but I
Right.
think it had funding from then. And, Barry Brenzinger's daughter was the executive director at Evelyn, yeah.
Okay. Real quickly, Dave McGuckin in the chat asked if he could make a comment or question. So is that, all right? Okay, while we wait for him,
I'm gonna leave you guys, because I have a 3 o'clock. This is my day of talking. This is I can't smile yet, now. Anything for me before I do that on the end?
I think we're good.
Just keep talking to my friends?
There you go.
Yes.
It always works.
Yeah.
Eyes open, ears.
I think I got so much yesterday, because I have not spoken to any of these people in probably 6 weeks. And it's like, oh, you can talk.
Great. Thank you, Teresa.
And I'll help you with the due diligence and,
Yeah, let's
yeah,
talk
yeah,
offline.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, this is good. You guys have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you, you as well.
Thank you, thank you.
I think also doing that intelligence has a dual benefit. If we don't find that we have commonalities, at least we know a little bit more about
Exactly.
another opposition.
Well, and exactly right. That's a good point, Paul. And I think, again, the feedback we're getting is this kind of notion of looking to November, and people, obviously the advocates who would like to change something here are looking to flip the bodies and do something different. Of course, the governor's going to be on the ballot. He's going to come back now and just seek to come back, which maintains that dynamic. But to this point, it would be helpful to know if there's common ground. It would be helpful to understand if they intend to, spend, run a campaign, do something that maybe something worth noting. So we'll do that homework and come back around to you.
I just
And
wanted
the
to,
Education
could-
Commission.
whoops, sorry.
But Jane?
It's just, Jane, I just wanted to thank Jim and his team for kind of taking the temperature too, and reaching out that, we know we can't control what amendments might creep up, and we have to watch things, but that's the kind of information that we would never be able to get, what's the focus, what's education talking about and stuff like that. So I think it is a great time to reach out to the school funding folks, because we may have some time, before these kinds of bills come forward. And so I wanted to thank you guys for doing that research, and hopefully reaching out will render us some common ground.
Agreed.
Yes, it is important that we know what the temperature of everything is in the House and in the Senate. And you all have much better sense of that than we do.
I thought I wrote it down here, but I can't find it. What's the current schedule? You said like the 5th and the 6th, they're dealing with retained bills, and then when are they starting hearings on the new bills?
So the House, it will meet definitely the 5th and the 6th, possibly the 7th, we've been told. So they're going to take up the retained bills from 2021. They're going to take up the governor's vetoes, there was 4 of them. And then they'll move into, that's going to take time, I think. But hearings, to your question, Paul, probably be the end of January or sooner. So, yeah.
So no dates have really been set.
Nothing's been set yet. No.
Yeah, a lot of these bills haven't been assigned yet, and that's ongoing. So when that first calendar comes out, that'll be kind of a treasure trove of information for us. But yeah, they'll get old business out of the way, and then those first two, second, third week of January.
And keep in mind, the House retained about 200 bills. Well, yeah, the Senate will be different. They I think they can be, it's January 5th, and they just might meet one day.
Right.
They'll just wait for the House, any House bills that would veto, they'll be taken up first, and then, in the Senate, so they just might meet one day.
I know last January, they started having hearings much sooner than anyone anticipated. It's not like,
They were right out of the gate, no, you're right, Paul, they were right out of the gate,
So-
which we were surprised, like, it was like, but.
Scramble.
Yeah, it was, okay, we're ready. But, yeah, we'll see, but typically in January, but we'll see if they count.
So are there any other questions on, I guess, legislatively, like, what, and I think we've got on here, and we'll continue to monitor, there'll be other bills that come out, more language that'll come out. I think what as we, going forward, so I'd like you to be able to read the bills that we're flagging, so we can compare notes and make sure, if there's not something that doesn't pique someone's curiosity. So as those come out, we'll include those in the weekly reports we'll continue to get here. Any other questions or?
Are you monitoring any jail car activity that might come out in terms of any definitions or anything else in that regard?
Yeah.
So I do, yeah, I do.
Jail car is one of Kathy's most favorite topics.
Yes, there's been
I don't follow it, but no, we do keep a pulse on
In
it.
another life, I worked in the governor's office and in the law school. I spent a year and a half at the Department of Health and Human Services doing administrative rules and legislative work. And that was, as a young man, that was enough for me. So, well, with that, we segued briefly into communications here, and so the reaching higher conversation is really kind of part of that in terms of external outreach. We talked a lot about communications earlier in the year, and the truth is, from my perspective, some advocates, they did a few op-eds, but it's been pretty quiet. And my sense is so long as it's quiet, and there's not a pressing need for us to be out there, probably ought not be, and raising this as an issue. I think we, should match, and we see in the legislature people are pushing, then obviously we're going to push back. I did know Jane was kind enough to forward along a couple weeks ago now, Jane, email you'd gotten about, I think it was like a bus tour on school funding and next year, worth keeping an eye on to see, where that goes and what happens with it, but, and we will, but, I think for us right now, it's continuing to maintain relationships in the legislature, weighing in as appropriate on bills that, you collectively believe are worth us weighing in on, as we did previously, and building a little bit here, as we move along. Something to keep in mind, not for right now, but as we look ahead and get into an election season, which is going to happen pretty quickly, and that's where folks' heads really already are, we want to think about opportunities, and we talked about this before, maybe an issue survey, and messaging candidates and members about where they are in certain issues of concern to us, and seeking that feedback and collecting that data. We'll be able to monitor in real time as we know who's retiring, who's not coming back next year. The legislative filing period for candidates for office is in June. There's a prescribed 10-day window where everyone that wants to be on the ballot in 2022 has got to file. So we're going to know fairly quickly who's coming back, who's not, and who's seeking to come back, who's seeking maybe office as a new member. And we want to message them and hopefully get some intelligence on them. I mentioned the Senate president who's thinking about a run. We already know Senator French is not coming back. He's announced he's running for Congress in the second CD, even though he may be redistricted out of the second CD and into the first, but he's running for Congress regardless. So those are going to start coming here as we move along, and we'll be able to assess. But I think from a communication standpoint, what I maybe care about the most for today is maybe to think through, while we're still in this hybrid phase of needing a quorum to meet in person, how often would we like to meet? We'll continue weekly reports, and if anything's breaking, then you'll get that in real time. How often do we do this? This room, by the way, is available at no cost. I think we talked about Concord being a central spot we can do this in, but I would like to get some sense from you so we can maybe try and book some dates out in advance 'cause I know it's a scramble to get on your schedules, you're all very busy. So, any thoughts on that?
I think for the time being, we would probably be safe if we stayed on the occasional meeting schedule till, sounds like from your dates, mid-January, second or third week in January. And then I think at that point, depending on, you know, what you get out of the calendar and how you think things are gonna go, we're either gonna go to bi-weekly, monthly.
Yeah.
But I think it's gonna be more, response driven as to what we'll have to produce as a group. Because if it ends up that a lot of these bills just get pushed off, then I don't see a need for us to be meeting bi-weekly.
But the only impetus to meet regardless is to make sure you maintain your momentum and group cohesiveness and identity, because you will know as, you know, 2 months go by, 3 months go by, you know.
Right.
And you get local elections, up the cities, you know, in March. You'll have turnover there, you might have new people there. Who is this coalition? Why are we a member? So we do want to have some.
If you bring up your spreadsheet and show people what it
It would be easier to have a scheduled meetings, even if we don't need to have them, we can cancel them. because-
Standing meeting.
Yeah, because trying to fit things in, I'm sure trying to line the stars is it's a challenging task.
Well, exactly, and that was my thought. I agree, Phil, with kind of the sense that we may not need them, but to Sean's point, it feels like if we had them on the books and just decide, you know what, we're okay this week, you know, we'll go in the 3 weeks from now. I think it would help, because I understand, I know you're all busy, and until we, you know, we need 3 out of 5, at least you something you can book, and then we can do a determination, you know, a few weeks out. Here's what the calendar looks like, we're probably okay right now. Here's some breaking information, we may want to get together and consider this. So if you're amenable to that, I might propose a schedule for you to consider, and
Yeah.
at least get us through the session maybe,
Right.
and then we can kind of calendar it. That feels right.
Fairmont, you have the joint board, and then you have
Yeah.
the wider board.
Mark?
I agree. I agree. Let's just stay with the second or third week in January. And Jim, get that list out to the group when you are able. And let's tentatively put those dates in our calendar or come up and let us know that those dates aren't good for you for whatever reason. And then let's stay with at least monthly meetings scheduled, and if we don't need them, we won't meet.
Okay.
I just wanted to give you all a heads up that I am not going to run for the select board in Newberry again. And I will continue to share the information with Newberry. But once I go off the board, you will need another elected official on the 5-man board.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Joy, because I think one of the dates we should set as our revisiting who's a member of the joint board and the structure of the joint board. Does anyone know right off? I was looking through my notes. I couldn't find anything. Is there anyone, what date would we be looking at for the joint board? Is it March or April?
Mark, you're talking about the full board, correct?
Well, the full board, but also, I mean, it also boils down to the 5 of us as well on the joint board.
Mm-hmm.
When would people be expecting that we would revisit the structure of the boards after town meeting, I'm assuming, right?
I would think
Oh, I
that
see
that
what
would
you're
make
saying.
sense.
Reorganization,
Right.
like a potential reorg vote.
Yeah, that's right, a reorganization meeting and a reorganization of the joint board. So we should have that on the calendar and make everybody, all of the membership aware of those dates so that they're thinking about them after the town meetings.
Our memorandum states there's an annual meeting in July, that's for the
Okay.
full membership, and that the joint board meets regularly on quarterly or more frequently as necessary.
Okay,
The
so,
minimum requirement is quarterly.
okay, then we'll wait till July then. If that's all
Well,
right.
actually, joint board shall meet once a month, with the members during, legislative session.
So the joint board meeting would be a good time to reorg, except it falls out of, the only election cycle would fall out of it, these cities, because most of the cities don't. That's their
Yeah.
election, I don't know if you know this show.
But if we wait until the
Okay.
July, if we wait until the July meeting of the entire group, the full membership, then I think we can reorganize the joint board based on that.
In
But won't
July,
you need an alternate for me once I'm no longer an elected official?
Yeah,
And
we
that
can,
would be as of town meeting.
yeah, that would be for the April meeting, right?
because that
or
would
if
be
we-
no different if. Go ahead, Mark.
And yeah, and right, it would be no different than anybody else leaving a position or whatever.
But personally, what I would say, and although it is expressly in the memorandum, I think a meeting of the greater group in January to kick off the legislative season, anticipate another one in April on a quarterly type basis. The joint board meets monthly
Mhm.
in the interim. And then that April meeting is where you deal with any vacancies that are a result of March's. And of course, the next quarter would be the July annual meeting. And remember, this expires December 31st, 2022. So
Yeah.
the annual meeting is where we decide, do we want to continue as a group? Is there a need to continue as a group? And if so, how do we renew it?
Right.
I just be careful about a full board meeting, because trying to get that many people to appear in January and then April and then July may be a bit of a challenge. I think if you're asking those folks to show up once a year, that's probably the best you're gonna get out of them, if you can even get a quorum then. And we gotta think about tactically whether or not we need to meet more frequently in February, March, April. That's when you're gonna have a lot of activity coming down.
Right.
So I guess you kind of need to tell us the pulse of that.
Yeah.
And as sooner you get those on the calendar, I mean, all of our schedules, I'm sure, fill up quickly, yours as well.
So what I'm hearing here, I think, is for the legislative session, the joint board will book once a month.
Yeah,
We'll seek to, and then,
Yes.
okay.
At least, yeah.
And then for the full board, do we want to convene a meeting in July to bring everybody together?
That's what I think. I wouldn't
Well,
vote
we
for
have
it.
to by the memorandum.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. I'm sorry, January. Do we want to try and, or,
I don't think so. What are you gonna tell them?
okay.
I'm
Right.
just concerned about radio silence, the big vacuum, everyone says, oh, they're doing nothing, why should I spend money?
Yeah.
Because we have another assessment coming up.
Well,
Right.
we're sending updates to them, aren't we?
Yeah.
well, I think, yes,
I'm sorry to
I
interrupt. Have we been sending the messages that we get as the joint board and the great summaries of legislation? That's been going out to everyone, right, Jim? The whole
That
membership?
is, yes, that is correct. Yes, correct.
Good, okay, thanks.
So they are all getting that.
Mhm.
We just might have difficulty trying to get all those people to, because they have to physically, a quorum has to be present now. This may be a bit of a challenge to do if we're really not, there's nothing earth shattering that's to act upon.
Unless the law changes. In June,
Correct.
yeah.
Right, that'd be, that's June though,
Right.
best case
We
scenario.
can't rely on that, but
so I think
Although
during
if you're,
during the winter, I would propose that we just have the joint board on call for monthly meetings, which we can cancel the week before if there's no reason to meet. I think if I sent a letter out to all of the selectmen, select boards, just reminding them about their membership in the group. I think we need at the January meeting to review the budget and whether or not there's actually a need to have an assessment in 2022. Because we do have quite a bit of money in the fund right now. Remember, a lot of the towns that were part of the 81,000 balance just rolled their money into the new account. So we have over $100,000 available. And then if we do want to have an assessment, to Paul's comment, I would say that we would get everybody together in February, the entire membership, because that's prior to the town meetings.
I was gonna add to, just because we call a general meeting, it doesn't necessarily have to be a meeting. It's just an update for those who care
Right.
to get an update. And so long as we don't have any action items to be taken, whether we have a quorum or not, of the wider membership or not.
Yeah.
is, I mean, it's not how I like to deal with things, but it's not an imperative.
Right.
And I'm just concerned about member
Yep.
commitment over time, if they don't hear from us. Or don't even have a face-to-face connection. Or it could be still Zoom. And again, we know that we're not taking actions, but hey, the real people doing real things, doing real good.
We ought to position this as insurance. Every time we turn around and decide to back off, the thing pop it back up.
Yeah.
And as long as they have all the reliance right now on property taxes, coupled with, people want, it seems like the electorate wants more freedom to where they send their kids to school. There's a lot of hot button topics that would be nice to bring back to our communities. So I'm not so sure that we should just say that when this adequacy thing will go away, and most likely will not. And when they get their backs to the wall, they will come back after the towns that they think they can afford it, no matter how disproportionate it appears. So this is not a group to turn around and just worry about the amount of money that we spend on dues, because it's in terms of the total cost of things, there's pocket change. But the legislature can turn on a dime with an amendment that could turn around and hurt a lot of these communities. So you need something like this ongoing, in my opinion.
Okay, well then, I will put together a slate of dates for everyone to consider, and we'll begin that. We have a little bit of time, but better we start now while we have some time for the holidays and get those on the books, hopefully. And I guess maybe decide a little bit later how and when to have the larger meetings. But you know, to your point, Paul, we certainly can. And this meeting opportunity goes out to all the members, of course. We'll continue to do that. But okay.
I think we need to remind people that this organization is an insurance policy, that they will not be blindsided, that they will know what is coming down the road at them.
Well, and to that, and with that in mind, and we talked about this earlier, the balances are narrow. It's not going to take much to push, you know, a perspective up over the top here and change things pretty dramatically. You know, last year, I mean, how many resignations or deaths among the membership that we have? Special elections.
Oh.
And just even forget about November. I mean, we're seeing that change in the numbers in real time.
It was kind of sad. It's almost every week there was a death or a vacant. It's like someone resigned. It was. It was.
It's
Yeah.
And redistricting, we still don't know what that's going to do.
right.
putting the congressional district aside.
Right. You know, the new people that replace these folks, they haven't a clue about adequacy, they don't have a clue about equalization. You try to explain equalized value to somebody.
Well, to that end,
You can see their eyes roll back.
that's a good point. A long-term goal, in the next 6 months to a year, we should be prepping an education seminar for new members.
We can absolutely do that, and that's not uncommon. I think it would be worth, once we know what the slate is in June, we can make that outreach and, do it group sessions, do it individually, but make an effort to lay the groundwork so folks understand this issue, because you're right. The vast majority are going to come into this completely cold, and the truth of the matter is, every 2 years we see a turnover in the legislature of 25 to 32%. And unquestionably, there will be folks that have a lot of institutional experience walking away this fall. So, part of that insurance policy is make sure that the folks coming in understand this issue and where we're coming from.
All right, that sounds like a good idea, Jim.
I think that's a proactive move that has a lot of value. I would be in favor of that.
The other thing that seems to be changing in the state is the changes in valuations of everybody's homes, and how that shifts things around, sometimes to the good and sometimes to the bad. People are not happy with the property tax. And you can turn around and stand up in front of everybody and say it's a New Hampshire advantage, which is a joke, in my opinion. But the reality is that they're looking for something different. Get off that sole reliance, which is hurting a lot of people. It's not, we all agree that Berlin and towns like that are getting killed, but we can't funnel a common source of funds unless we steal it from other towns. The state ought to be able to figure out how to turn around and straighten that issue out without turning around and tagging somebody else to pay the bill. We got to, it's complex, but still, the people are seeing it inching down in some of the southern community as well.
I think that's
Yeah.
why, like, even, go ahead.
I think that's going to especially be important, Terry, as the towns are getting ready to send in their value information to do the equalization process. And I think that has the potential to really change things across the state with all of the increases in property values that we've seen. It'll be interesting to see what the lineup of potential quote unquote donor communities look like once that equalization is done.
I'd also add a cautionary tale. I can't speak to the more resort areas like yours, Mark, but in Newington, our utility values are beginning to shrink. The 3 power plants went for sale, and they went for sale much lower than anyone anticipated. So Newington is granting abatements on a controlled basis. We lost $1 million this year. I don't know what the subsequent values are. So in terms of Newington's commercial values, we may not be the cash cow everyone thinks we used to be. But that market segment is shrinking.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we just settled our utility values at a much lower amount on an abatement request, and that happened in many communities. And so you're right, the commercial is going down while the residentials are skyrocketing. So it'll be, I think, the next couple of months waiting to see what DRA comes back with the equalization information. We'll have to take that into consideration as well.
Including the assessment, if we
Yeah.
have one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Motion to adjourn?
We have a motion to adjourn, we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, folks.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Everyone
Bye-bye.
have a lovely holiday.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you.
Safe travels, Mark.